And can we just have everybody take a quick look at the minutes from the meeting we had last October 15th? I believe we did have a meeting in between that was a non-quorum meeting. Could have been on the hood of a pickup truck, could have been indoors for a little while. I don't remember.
It was weather related.
I thought it was, well, the last one was a cancellation.
Yeah.
But that's obviously still another one between then and October 15th, so.
Oh, is that supposed to be November? We did have a meeting in November, didn't we?
Well, yeah, again, that was the question. I didn't remember if this was October or,
Oh, wait,
was that November 15th?
the 19th,
Or whatever
the 19th,
of November.
yes.
So this is November 19th.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, gotcha.
This is minutes of November 19th?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, because we just missed one meeting in
Yep.
December.
Yep, yeah, that was the last one that we had, and then December was canceled for the storm. That makes more sense now, because I was trying to figure where that other month was.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes with the correction of November 19th, 2019 instead of October 15th.
Do we have a second? Everybody taking a look?
And if there's anything that ought to be changed for me,
Yeah.
I just put
No,
this
that's-
together.
that's
No,
great.
this looks good. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Not like it's all on one page.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I'll make a second to accept the minutes as amended.
Oh, hold on, I have one more.
Oh, no. Well, it's amended, so it could be.
Amended, okay, there we go. Cemeteries in the northwest corner of the woodlot. Under old business number 1. Or at least that's what we think it was. Yeah,
Next to the road?
yep,
Doesn't that road go north-south?
no, east-west.
Okay.
Yeah, it's these.
Okay, so if I can second as amended? Or somebody
Do
else
you need
have
a
to do
second
that?
to amend? Yeah, I'll second it again. as
Okay.
amended.
With
both amendments.
It was amended. That was
Okay.
the language, so
There we go.
we'll just make those, I'll make those two changes and.
Yep,
and-
forward back to, yeah, I told Jen that we'd start to, submit these things back to her regularly and
Yeah.
certainly keep them, after they're, corrected or amended, yep, exactly. Yep. So working through the old business, I guess, is probably,
You wanna vote on
Yeah. All in favor?
on the amendment?
it? No, on the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I apologize.
We need to vote to approve the minutes.
Okay. Let's vote to amend the minutes. We have, what's my actual phrase?
All in favor?
All in favor? Vote to amend, all in favor.
Okay.
Okay. I'll get this sooner or later.
All right, well,
No, don't help too much because then you might get that job.
there's a two-letter word.
Yes. Okay, and just following up with the old business on the town forest, the town farm lot. Upon request at the last meeting, I have gone back and revised and abridged, I guess is probably the word to use, the plan, take out a little bit of jargon, a little bit of data, maybe have something that's a little more of a publicly consumable product for the management plan without change to its recommendations or anything like that. So I did bring 2 copies of the plan and can submit that back to Jen along with the original plan for dissemination to anyone in the town who would like one, so you can.
Are the changes significant, or are they?
No, again, there are no changes to any recommendations or anything to be done. It was just that the request was kind of, can I put something out that has a little less, it's a little less heavy, a little easier to read for the public. The original plan is pretty data-driven, but obviously there's no change in acreages of this or recommendations of that. I just went back through with my non-forester daughter and allowed her to kind of look at it and say, well, this is pretty verby, or this is pretty heavy forestry terminology. Can we, reword some stuff or something like that, so that it can be, again, a little more easily absorbed by those that don't want to dive into the terminology of it. So again, there's not any change in actual, any actual policy or recommendations or anything like that.
Can you share that electronically?
I can, yes, like I said, I'll give that to you guys and to Jen, that way, again, if someone wants to add to that, it'll be in the original, but I just cut out some of the stuff, that way people aren't as intimidated to take a look at it and hopefully.
Just basically simplified.
And good for us to, as like a quick reference and to
Well,
like search in.
that's as far down as I can get.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. I mean, the idea
Yeah, that's
being
good.
is that the recommendations that are within the plan are data-driven, they're, knowledge-driven and all that kind of stuff. And without me actually teaching forestry, I can't cut it back too far. So basically, I just went back and said, okay, if I'm looking for a layman's version of this that's a little bit more easily absorbed and not put down with a blank stare, what can we do with that? So a couple of 8 or 9 pages, 10 pages got cut out of it, and hopefully that might not be as intimidating to those that would want to take a crack at reading it and again, absorbing it.
I guess in looking at the original one that you're referring to, I looked through it as extensively, I guess, as one could, and it does generate a lot of questions. And I'm wondering, I guess, even though this one is probably easier for the average Joe to understand, I guess if people, public, want to know some of the more deeper stuff, I mean.
Oh, they're both available.
Yeah.
Both copies.
Yeah. No, Jen already has the original. And again, it was just a request to try to put out something that might be a little more easily absorbed or less intimidating to pick up and try
Yeah,
to.
easier to hand
That's
out
all.
to people.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is one of the questions that I had in looking at this is some of the timeline goals of the plan. Like a lot of it is driven like on a 0 to 10 year would be the first.
Yeah.
And we seem to be putting some energy into getting our act together to get something together for the warrant this year. And I'm wondering if maybe that may be a little bit premature to try to get something on the warrant this year, because in looking at some of this information, it looks to me, especially in reviewing some of the information that's contained in the comprehensive plan, that there still needs to be a lot of work and details hashed out before anything is really moved on as far as a timber harvest goes.
That's certainly an interpretation. I mean, the idea behind the document is that it's a working document and it's changed and it's amended as you move forward through time. So to try to say something like, what are we going to do in year 20 or year 25 if we haven't set forth on year 0 through 10 is obviously premature,
Right.
kind of thing that way. So there is a certain assumption that the plan will be adopted when it is adopted, and that it will be year 0, let's say, or whatever it happens to be. I'm going to get into a little bit about the timeline between now and town meeting here in a couple of minutes as well.
Yeah.
But certainly as far as all of that goes, that's all open to discussion.
Yep.
Again, we have talked about and need to get the idea that between now and town meeting, there would also be workshops. We've already had a couple out into the field and would continue to do so. So any of the practices recommended within the plan can be shown, and obviously, having to work around town, I can, do tours and say, the stand that we have that looks something like this as stand 1 or stand 2 on our lot looks about something like this, and with, neighbors' permission or something along those lines, or other landowners in town, certainly these things can come in within the workshops to tour other lots and say, this is what my mind's eye, or this recommendation within the plan shows. This stand looks like this stand on the town farm lot, and the treatment recommended would look like this.
Right.
Or something along those lines as an example. So,
But
obviously the theory behind, when to do these things is all open to the committee and to the town meeting
Yeah.
to move forward or not to, certainly.
I mean, like, I have no problem, like, adopting a plan, but I've done a lot of research on some other things, and I just think that the timing of doing any work up there is going to have a direct impact on wildlife habitat, and an abutting lot has been cut quite significantly, and I think that giving that parcel some time to regenerate is a good idea if we're going to consider the wildlife habitat in that area.
Yep.
And not only that lot in that immediate area, other lots not far from there have seen significant cutting in the last 6 months in that same area. And I've done some research through the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and the area down off of like the Hebel-Hibo Road that extends from Acton all the way to Lebanon is a significant piece of woods, and that's like a major corridor for wildlife. And in the past decade, there's been a lot of significant cutting going on in that area as well. So there's a lot of things that are impacting a lot of wood lots and major tracts of woods around the town lot. So I have a lot of concerns as far as the timing of implementing a cut. The town and, most people, they don't have much of a say what people do on their private lots per se, but we're the stewards of a significant chunk of woods. That's also earmarked for recreation and open space and has a lot of other uses. I have a lot of concerns as far as timing it so that the impact to a lot of these things are lessened, I guess. I don't know how other people feel about that, but...
I'm remiss in not having looked at that yet. I did mention to you that there was a plan for that woodlot already done for the town back in 1958. I don't know if it was if you ever came across that.
No.
But I found it interesting. I don't even know if they activate. I know it was in the article said that the state forester, whoever he may be, I don't know if that's the extension forester, what they defined as a state forester back that far. But there was a plan for that Old Town Farm done, but they referenced it.
Right.
Now, whether they cut it off immediately or not, I know it was being cut for pulp and paper, but it was done with a state plan. So I thought that'd be interesting to look at that.
That would be
going forward.
Yep.
I noticed 5 or 6 years later, in 1964, they actually referenced cutting a town farm. I'm not sure that was, they didn't say which, so I don't know if it was the new town farm or the old. But it could be.
I don't know if the Hebo-Hibo one was town-owned at that point.
No, that wasn't though.
Right.
As I said before,
Right.
the new town farm, which grandfather had, which was adopted, that they came through the Huntress, the Hunter, that, the old Warren property that you question. That's why that came up, was because that was the new town farm. And that was the one they actually made investments in. They actually insured it and they worked on the building. I helped take it down, but that's neither there. It would be interesting just to see if they did a plan just for the sake of it. I do think, as I said last meeting, the comprehensive plan throws a lot of a lot of avenues at us relative to what we do with the town forest. You know, and I don't know which article it was, sometimes in the 70s, that did invest this committee with utilizing the town farm as a town forest. You know, so, you know, there was, I don't know what the precedent for that is. So there's, you know, I think I'm wondering in saying, what is the long-term perspective we want to have on this? You know, because, you know, the comprehensive plan actually invests this committee with so many avenues toward conservation. But, you know, if we looked at the town farm as a starting point for what we might be able to do with other properties that come up, you know, it was like back years ago, I was on the planning board, and we had the first organized gravel pit.
Right.
I'm not saying how I like how gravel goes in the town or whatever. I have my own prejudices against that or opinions on it, but we had to set a precedent on what we wanted, a guideline for a town pit.
Yep.
And we had to set a pretty high standard, you know, because that's, you know, it's a new book, is all I'm saying. You know,
Well, I think part of the stuff that we're going to be dealing with in looking at this moving forward, again, we're going to talk a little bit about warrant articles here in a few minutes, but toward Andy's point certainly is that it's a philosophical question that you need to ask yourself. And as a forester, I don't tend to be one who, how do I put this, I guess? If a property is due to be managed, or if a property is managed, you are looking at the natural resources on that property, you are looking at adjacent properties, but there is a certain philosophical question of whether or not a parcel of property is so-called undermanaged in order to try to compensate for something that may be presumed overmanaged next door, or something, or down the road, or in a certain region. So you do have that philosophical question to ask yourself, is what is the best, you know, way for the town to go forward and look at something like that?
When was that land that you referred to at the town farm that we saw when we were out there that was like major cut, you know, it was.
Right, well, that was within a couple of years ago, and, you know, it'll be a while before that comes back, certainly.
But you're right,
But it's,
it does provide habitat the way it is.
Correct.
And if you look at the surrounding lots, including the town lot, you know, how can we, I think if I understand what you're saying, how can we use that to help wildlife? And if you need, it's a great browse area for all kinds of species now, but they also need some cover. So what do we need to look at on the town lot for cover, because you got an opportunity.
right, you're never managing anything exclusive of what's around it. You're managing things and trying to take it into account, certainly. So again, that's definitely something philosophical to look at. And again, with the, so I guess we'll bring it up with regard to the language of warrant articles and timing of warrant articles coming up, I guess. But toward that end, I guess we do need to start talking and saying is that in talking with Jen today, she will be looking for something within the next month in order to have on her desk, and she says that the town is generally the one who, on something like this, starts to come by boilerplate language of the writing of the article to what I called, in talking with her today, I guess I'll just segue right into this part of it.
Well, hang on before you do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a little confused. You said that the plan has to be adopted? The forest management plan had to be adopted?
This hasn't been adopted by the town, has it?
Well, the plan was commissioned. The plan was produced, the plan is submitted. So I suppose it's a language question and a theoretical question of, is adopting the plan, I mean, it's data. The plan is data.
Right.
So the recommendations within the plan, like I've said, this is a working document which workshops can take into consideration and to amend. So in my mind, the adoption of the plan the submission of the plan and the adoption of the plan isn't necessarily something that says that on June 2nd, after the adoption, the skidders roll in or something like that. None of that is even close to being that hard, that concrete of how that would move forward. But you do have to say, if the plan is adopted, that means that these goals are goals that the town values. These are areas that the inventory says this might be needed in this area, and that might be needed in that area. This is what you have, and then part of the plan is, this is the recommendations of what one would do with this plan, given goals that people like yourself had given to us before the plan was written. I called you and Dave in and asked around and said, what do we have as different goals for different sections of this property? And then that went into the recommendations within the plan on what was recommended to do here, there, or nowhere, whatever each stand dictated. But again, so the point is, come June, in my mind, you will need to have something so-called adopted in order to say that, we are going to try to move forward with using this as the base for management of this property.
Instead of,
So the verbiage of the articles we can talk about in the timeline, certainly, but I guess in order to move forward from this point, rather than just have this be something that's, circular filed or something along those lines,
So
we do need to have something that's,
so this has to be, is this what we bring to the annual meeting? Is that this needs to be like public hearing? Yeah, at first I thought this was, like when I first got it, I thought it was already adopted, it was the plan. But obviously, it hasn't been,
it's been accepted by the town.
it has to be accepted.
no, I've been paid for it, so technically
So it's
speaking, it's been
accepted.
accepted.
I think we're at a point, rather than using the word adopted, maybe.
The implementation is really the question.
We're implementing the plan, and, the dates, the timeframes, they can change. The data is all there, that hasn't changed, other than some growth.
But it's not just data in this, that's why I'm wondering if it has to go before the public and be accepted, or have a comment period on the plan. and
Well, that's
then
all parts
final.
of the workshops previous to the town meeting, is the idea.
So will the town actually vote on implementing this
That's what I'm,
plan?
Well,
On
that's
town
what
floor?
we're trying to.
That's what we're hashing out now, yeah.
because it is a plan, it's not just data, it has recommendations.
Right, right. Based on Steve's conversations with whoever in town and developed those recommendations and goals and heard the goals and then developed the recommendations to meet those goals. So I don't think at this point the goals would change, and I don't think there's a groundswell of support to, put in a Walmart there. It's,
No,
But it's the same as, like on the planning board, when a subdivision comes through, right, there's recommendations from the board, and it's like a working document, and then you have the public hearing, then there's input from the public, and then changes happen from there, and yeah, maybe the goals do change. And then you have subsequent meetings and submittals after that, so.
I'm going to back off of that statement a little bit and say you don't, and maybe this is just my interpretation, this is my personal opinion, you don't go change goals after the fact. You just, obviously things change, you have a way of moving forward, it's a working document like I said. But to say that, your goals need to be broad enough in order to not be changing them every couple of 5 minutes. This is a,
Oh, no,
this
that's
is
not what
a
I'm talking about,
process.
that's a big, yeah.
No, but having said that, I do want to make that point, is that if we're talking about implementation of a plan, don't work in this area over here because something new was found over here, the corner up along the northwest corner, now we found something that could be the cemetery. Obviously, I'm just making stuff up, but now we're requiring and requesting that we have certain protections for that area that didn't get included into the plan because we found more information out there. That's an example of how the document is worked with and brought forward through time. So it's not that, for example, if it says 5.25 acres, do this, you go out there and do 5.25 acres of it or anything along those lines. But the goal statements need to be large enough that you can carry the management of a parcel through time. So toward that end, I guess I will kind of differ with you in that what happens between now and town meeting or now and adoption and implementation is not as fine of a point as what you're talking about. I'm talking about the adoption as being something, a larger concept. The amendment and the the workshops that we'll be doing out on site, you know, the talking points that we'll have, the people that we'll have bring input, again, is all something that's going to evolve through time before work is done. But you don't move forward without the adoption of the plan first.
Yeah.
So that's my point,
But
is
I
that
just
you
think
have to,
the
you have to
public-
you have to keep the train on the tracks, and if the train is moved in a little different direction along the way, that's fine. But you have to say that we're trying to get to, again, figuratively speaking, wherever your destination.
Oh, yeah, that's a given, and
Right.
with anything, but it's, I'm trying to say, where are we going, you know, on that track is, to go towards the annual meeting. What is our goal to get to?
Well, does that mean we're now?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Jumped on that one.
Again, so, yeah, exactly. So again, in talking with Jen today, what she had mentioned is that the previous article that we had last year that commissioned the plan had mentioned, and it was brought about and said that let's see, the town will vote to raise and appropriate $3,000 for the cost of the forest plan and to approve that any unexpected funds as well as any potential revenues generated from future timber harvesting activities on this parcel are to be placed into the forest reserve account. So in her mind, and they are going to go back again, but that has hit the town lawyer as well.
Okay.
So that was our big question.
So we're now talking with Michelle, our treasurer, to just find out about how we talked about what was called the rollover at the end of each year of the forest reserve account, to make sure that we either need or don't need language to make sure that that fund continues to move through time into the new year.
What's the date on it?
That was last town meeting.
So
Well, I'm sorry, it would have been the one before that.
18, June 2018?
18, yeah. Because it was 18 and then the field work was done in the fall and it was submitted in March of 19. Was the date of the plan.
If I could have that, I'd put some of that language in the minutes. if people-
Yeah, that's fine.
So we don't have to
So,
have that for this
and
annual meeting.
again, toward Andy's point, that is putting the cart before the horse. But we do have language there already.
Okay.
So then the question came back as to saying, and this is rehashing some old stuff. Previously, the work that was done on the Hebo Town Farm property was something that was brought to the selectmen approved it, work was done, it never hit town meeting. We're doing it differently this time, and we're bringing it to town meeting. So that's why we're back in and saying, okay, we don't want this to necessarily just be the Conservation Commission saying this, we want to put this out to the town. So that's why, we're trying to disseminate the plan, we're trying to have more workshops, we're trying to bring more people out, onto the face of the earth, showing them what this stuff is and take feedback and make this the working document a little more so than it was, or amended by the public, so to speak, more than the previous one had been over on the Hebo lot. So toward that end, in talking with Jen today, she said that the articles which are going to hit the warrant more toward procedural code changes of town are going to be required by the 7th of February. That, she said, is not as hard, right, it's coming up fast. But she said that's not a hard thing, a hard number for us to have to worry about. But she said that the town and the powers that be bring about essentially the wording and would like wording or jargon or the goals, and I just tried to verbally walk through the concept behind adopt and implement the plan in order to then gain authorization from the townspeople to then move forward with the adoption of the plan and the implementation of the plan in whatever form we decide that to be as a committee.
So we
all
can
of
be
the
just
different-
general, you know, to be just that.
Right, exactly. It doesn't have to be, and again, you don't want to get too far into the weeds with it. But again, to adopt the plan means now we have some goals that have been adopted, we have some management strategies that have been adopted, and now we can say, all right, let's line up this, that, or the other, and workshops that happen between now and then to get the information out there, show townspeople what can happen and, you know, how it might happen, and again, if the committee decides that this isn't the time to do the work, it can be done later. We don't have enough consensus, even if the plan is adopted,
Right.
doesn't mean that it has to be implemented at that time, but you do need some level of an adoption in order to move the train forward, in my mind anyway. So she will be, again, I gave her just, you know, that sentence essentially that I just, you know, spewed out to you, and that I'm looking for some level of an adoption and implementation strategy by the town, and that would what this warrant article that she will help us draft for the town meeting will be.
Okay. Can we do any of that tonight, or is that something?
Well, again, anything, if anyone wants to put out a few, you know, key terms or words, again, my comment was, what is the verb that we need in this statement? And the ones that I came up with were adopt and implement. And then she said she could put up, you know, a couple of,
Yeah, she would give it to the lawyers, they'd wrap it all up.
exactly right, yeah. Yep.
Well,
So again, if there are other parts to the concept that we need to introduce to them, then yeah, we need to be moving on that. You know, we can go back and forth and talk them over now and can continue work between now and then and give that data back to her. I can continue stuff, you know, by email and phone conversations too. But again, the biggest thing that I'm looking for is the concept behind adopt the plan in order to be able to move forward with the process. Not the process of cutting at this point, but the process of adoption and, again, how to move forward with what you do with the.
I think some of this stuff, too, for me, is one of the things that Wes had mentioned, and it's on here next, and I don't want to get off what we're talking about, but going through some of the stuff that's in the comprehensive plan kind of, to me, kind of throws a wrench in the overall, what are your overall goals and expectations of utilizing the town forest? We can certainly discuss that when we get there, but one of my concerns is that the plan is done, and it's a plan that can be adjusted, I understand that. But once you move and adopt and implement the plan, it should align with what's in the comprehensive plan, should it not?
Sure.
I don't think the comprehensive.
Are you coming by something new that we didn't have previous, and if this is a new subject or something?
No, I mean, this is just me looking at, you know, Wes had mentioned last time that we've been looking at this from a timber harvest perspective, that it might be a good idea to look at it from the comprehensive plan, to look at it from a different angle. So that's kind of what I did, was I printed off 100 and some odd pages of the comprehensive
I did
plan.
too.
Some of it's interesting to read and some of it is not quite so interesting, but some of the goals that were driven in the comprehensive plan, I just want to make sure that they're contained in what we do as we're the stewards of the town forest, to make sure that we're not leaving anything out as we move forward. And some of that is, you know, it's based on some of the goals and strategies that were laid forth in the comprehensive plan.
So parts of, I guess, go ahead and lay some of them on me.
But
I mean, obviously, I don't want, without getting too far off into the
No,
weeds,
I
but,
don't think we have.
I mean, is there
The
something?
Conservation Committee goes back to the 1970s, and it was a state, game warden was on local citizens and whatever, and their attitude was to protect natural resources. That was the main thrust. So to me, when I look at it, conservation relative to this parcel, I see that wetland.
Mhm.
Okay. Having said that, the comprehensive plan, particularly the second version, the second time it was adopted, it focused on the historical aspect being part of the conservation. It threw those out, whether it was trying to be historical / conservation, or whether it was just conservation and land use. I mean, those are the questions that they bring up here in the addendum to that 2005 edition of it.
Right.
But if you go back to the original one, it's a lot more of an open inventory of what the town might like. And so that one seemed to have a lot more focused on resources than this does. But I'm a historical nut, so the town farm is a historical property. So I did mention, I believe that I did expand on that cemetery print, that there was more graves to the
No, I don't
southwest.
think I heard.
Okay,
You got
Hannah and I had a nice delightful
Oh, nice. Yeah.
nice walk, because I wanted to go back to the Lincoln, that road that goes back to the Lincoln School,
Mhm.
and then maybe follow the brook up and come up along the back side of that road. I'd still love to do that.
Well, again, we're still debating on
Yeah.
that this is, what Mike found was not the cemetery that Bill was looking for,
I don't
in
know.
his mind.
I don't know, the one on the corner, I don't know how extensive it was cut off. I mean, I think you probably could see quite a ways down across there if it was cut off. that
Oh,
way.
yeah, for sure.
And like, but I did go up and put pink ribbons to where I thought I saw another line of graves. Not that far away,
Gotcha.
but there was the line up close to the border, and then there was on that north wall.
Huh.
And then there was a line of them down below, and I projection, somebody said there was 40 graves in here. It's a possibility. But, if you take the two corners and extrapolate it, and I had not, a few times I walked across pieces of it, seen anywhere else where there is a cemetery.
Right.
It just, so,
You're thinking, so let me back up
I'm
and just
still
state
thinking
that
that
one more
might be-
time. You're
I'm
thinking
thinking
that
it might
there could
be.
be as many as 40 graves in there?
somebody said there was, all of them, I think, said there was 40 graves in there. But I don't know. How
That's,
many people died at the town farm? It was a town farm for a long time. I still have questions.
I'm just thinking,
I still have questions.
evidence-based, that sounds like a pretty darn big number. I certainly, I don't have any idea.
Well,
It was a
I think
big
there's
enough
14,
area.
there's probably 14 or 15 that I can see.
Yeah.
Graves.
I
Yeah.
think
There was 7 or 8 up next to the wall, and then down below,
Yeah.
another line,
Yeah.
probably another 7. If those 2 lines extended all the way,
There
it
was
could be.
4 rows of 10.
What's that?
4 rows of 10 before the peak.
Yeah, yeah. And they were tight, the people.
Well, I was thinking they were headstones and footstones, though. We were thinking that.
And they were, I'm saying that, I think Henry and I counted about 7 in this corner and another 7 on one that you kicked over, which I'm glad you did.
Gotcha.
Because that one,
Well, that's
the one
awesome.
that's there.
Yeah.
So if that
Yeah.
defines it, now, I don't know, I don't know who else is, if anybody else is around that might remember where that might be, because obviously it was marked off by Olive. And
Well, I'm just saying,
I'm sure
if
not
there's
the people
something
around.
that's that large out there, there's no way that that's not the one that Bill's talking about. I mean, if
Only on
you're-
the fact that he said he could see the wetland from that point, which is a good stretch, if that's possible.
That's hard. I mean, obviously,
I
it
find-
could have been wide open in the
If the
day.
trees are all, if the leaves are all off, then
Right.
possible. But, I find that stretch too.
Well, yeah, that's, so forgive me for jumping back. We can go for days on that, too. So I guess my question is, to try to just keep us on track a little bit, is there anything specific within the comprehensive plan that does not mesh well with what's in the plan that I wrote?
I haven't looked at that, so I can't.
I mean, obviously, for example, if
Got a
you,
good copy?
Well, yeah, and again, yeah.
Well,
I
I'm
guess
just
this is
looking at the
Yeah.
updates in the back, you know, that says the responsibilities of, like, one of them for the conservation is, we're supposed to prepare a coordinated priority list of most valuable lands for wildlife, scenic, and open space. Do we have that?
Probably somehow, if you look at, you know, some of the resource maps that have been prepared for the town, wetland areas, yeah.
Well, that's already that's in the plan.
Yeah.
The main
So there's a
natural area.
priority list of,
Is that to acquire or?
not to, that we should have a list so that when we talk about things like this, whatever, so that you know the priorities of the
Like Steve
different.
said, those have been prepared by the state.
Well, the main natural areas program has given the printout that shows all of the existing and potential habitats that are of concern and are at risk on the property.
But I think it's more on a local level that says it's ours, you know, it tells you, like, the selectmen is supposed to do this, the planning board's supposed to do this, the conservation committee is supposed to do this.
Gotcha.
And that was one of the, I mean, there's several in here.
There are quite a few items.
Yeah.
I have similar questions on, and a lot of it has to do with, because one of the things that the comprehensive plan really hammers on is the need for open space. And that's, you know, surrounds a lot of the development that they were predicting that would happen when the plan was written, I would imagine. But it's open space, it's recreation, it's wetlands, wildlife habitat, and that the map that's contained in this plan from the state, if you go onto that website, it mentions, you know, the great blue heron, and it gives you the status and the rank and the priority and whatnot. And the heron and the turtle is mentioned in this plan, but that website has links and it will give you, and this goes back to one of my first statements tonight, and it gives you like the amount of land like a moose needs for habitat, the amount of land that a coyote or a fisher or a raccoon, it breaks it all down, like a white-tailed deer, for example. One white-tailed deer, its range and its need for land is like just under 500 acres. So even though you're looking at a small area that's protected for 2 species, you've got a lot of species that rely on this open space and habitat, which that, you know, brings me back to my concern of you've got these large pieces of woods that are kind of, as far as the wildlife habitat goes, they've become fragmented by the cutting and development. The wintering areas, for example, like located down off the Hebel-Hybel Road, I bet if you talk to any biologist, the biologist would tell you that that wintering area is no longer viable because of the cutting and some of the development. I kind of got off on a tangent here because we were talking about the comprehensive plan, but I think that some of the things that were intended in the comprehensive plan for town-owned parcels were also driven towards recreation, like the nature trails, for example. The town has invested a lot of money and resources into like Goat Hill, for example. That is a prime example of preserving open space, developing recreational opportunities, creating a trail system. The town has done it on the Mary Grant property. Great educational value to that property. And I just think that we should be aligning the town forest with that. And part of the reason why I also feel that way is I kind of look at what Shapley has done with their town forest, even though it's significantly larger. What is it, like 800 acres?
Big chunk, I don't remember.
They manage the timber resources on that property, and they also have a nice trail system. that's clearly marked and, you know, it does have that educational piece
Well,
to it.
I guess my point to you is, I'm not disagreeing with one word that you're saying at all. My question is, it's a very big presumption that I'm hearing off in the background that whatever would be a possible forest management technique or harvesting is going to be averse or counter to all those other things that you just mentioned. Yet you mentioned Chapley is working on their property, is harvesting their property, has a plan very similar to this one, and talks about similar sorts of things. So I guess my question is again, back toward what I posed to Wes and to you too, is just simply the idea of if there's something counter to that, then by all means, let's talk it over. If there is something there that can't handle this, that, or the other treatment,
Yeah.
then by all means, let's talk it through. But there very much is a presumption that sounds like it's the background of the statement, is that all of those things are, can't happen in a coexistent relationship with a managed forest. So,
We're not gonna, you know, tonight.
yeah, no,
Oh, I know,
Even
I know.
by June, I don't think we would be able to go through, for the limited time that we meet, unless we, you know, get together more often, go through that comprehensive plan and go through and find out where every one of those things could be located on the town lot. What if you just said, we're going to, in the warrant article, say, you're going to adopt and implement the forest management plan on the town lot, but at all, this is not the right word, but at all times, you know, following the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. So when you get out there as a land manager, as a committee, we get out there and we're standing next to the cemetery, we're not gonna cut trees there, obviously. So how does it, but the comprehensive plan may say, you know, if this historical sites, we're gonna protect us. How do we do that while we're out there? The foundations, the well hole, the barns, the pastures that we saw at the town farm, how do we enhance those by, do we do anything there? Do we cut trees there? Very, very selective to make it more accessible for people to come in and make a trail into there. You know, we can, that is something we can do as a committee after June 1st, before a chainsaw hits a tree. So rather than try to go through each one of those beforehand, can we just put that overall arching language into the warrant article? Because, I don't know, when the new comprehensive plan will be developed.
It's really old. It's
Yeah.
usually every, what, 5 years or something.
Well, it's not that often, but it's a process. It takes 2 or 3 years to do.
Right.
So you've got the comprehensive plan that would change. You have the forest management plan that will change over time. Because
Right.
conditions change. So if we make that language flexible enough so that those two things can happen without everything coming to it.
I mean, coexist is the right word to use, really. I mean, the plan coexists within the goals of the comprehensive plan.
I look at this, and I like the concepts of within 10 years. Package per, it's not tomorrow, it's within 10 years.
Yeah.
Forests change a lot in 10 years. You know, if it's a good growth of timbers, it's amazing how much it'll change in 10 years. I mean, we've all gone across properties and
Oh my,
in 10
it changes
years, get lost.
2 or 3 years.
The second thing is patch cuts. You're not saying a patch, or you're not talking about dimension of
Yep.
those patch cuts.
Yep.
The one lot where you said 30 to 40%, is that a basal cut, or is that a basal percentage, is that total timber that you're taking off that when you say that 30 to 40?
I don't know which part you're
It's
referring to.
stand for, but there's this one, you say initial shelter wood treatment within 10 years, and then.
I know, that's probably the white pine that lied around the outside edges of.
You're giving us, this is giving a lot of leeway.
Oh, yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
Again, you have to, yeah.
Yeah, it's giving a lot of leeway. Well, that piece across the road certainly doesn't look like it's giving a lot of leeway.
Well, you don't know what the plan was. Maybe the plan was to remove 99%. You know,
Yeah.
and that's up
I know,
to the landowner.
A lot of us get shocked when we see what's supposed to be
Absolutely,
cut. Or, you know, I remember a piece that I used to play with down in the bog, Black Pond, and, you know, those deer paths down there, where you could see the deers walk the same paths for years. When they cut it, it wasn't a tree this big left. Gordon King cut it off, cut 50 acres down in there, and there was nothing left. And, you know, we just took it right down to the ledge. And you say, you know, how can you see this as good habitat generation? You know, I don't know how you, my conscience couldn't do it. You know, it's just, I had the same issue with gravel in the town years ago, quickly. I asked somebody, you grew up on this, and now you've got a pit 40 feet deep with straight sides, and you're telling me that you can still see it as the same piece of ground? Yes, I can. It's my ground. Darn, you know, how do you get that mindset? I can't do it. I can't put my mind into that, you know.
Well, toward all of our points is that it is the town's property,
It
and
is the
therefore
town.
what the town sees as being as good management for that property is what this committee needs to be doing with it.
I'm thankful that the committee has an opportunity to do that, because like, you know, the previous committee that had problems with the Eagle Apple project, you know, they didn't like what was done, you know. And it seemed as though nobody followed the recommendations that they might have, or the objections, or what they might have brought up in a meeting. You know, I'm not party to that, so I really can't comment on it. But it does, and the only reason I brought the comprehensive plan up at the last meeting is because it has a broader framework of what we might want to do on that parcel. And it is an interesting parcel, historically, in terms of the ancestry of the town, even to the name Hubbardston, and the Hubbardston, et cetera. But even though it wasn't those Hubbards that the town was named after. But, you know, it's still interesting that piece of the town has a lot of old history. If you go back into the 1780s, that land is really important in terms of how the town developed.
Well, the plan, again, without going back to Forestry 101 too much, I mean, the whole concept behind forestry is that you're managing the forest resources and all other associated natural communities and resources with it. So anything that we have out there, whether it's the wildlife, whether it's you know, the water and the soil, anything that we deem as important as a committee and as a town is adopted within that plan and looked at for, you know, conflicting or complementary goals as to affect its management. So there's nothing that says, again, so I guess that's just why I'm saying, backing up to 30,000 feet a little bit, I do want to have an idea that we aren't looking at this and saying or thinking that necessarily those ideas aren't complementary. I tend to think that they usually are. Now again, if you gravel 125 acres, are you going to go back and actually make a, you know, a plantation of virgin oak on it after you're done? No, of course not. That would not be complementary or anything like that. But you are looking at all of these things and saying, how do we draw a common thread amongst them? And I don't tend to think that, again, just maybe it's my profession and background, but I don't tend to think that there is conflicting maybe as some, that's all.
No, it's being into us by towns, by state, by feds, that you have to look into all of
No,
those things.
Andy's point about the use of a town forest to educate people to better forestry practices or better understanding of wildlife, like the Mary Grant Trail System does. You know, if you can identify traits, you know, I'm still learning, and I've given a number of seminars on tree identification. I've got one on my lot. I mentioned you, I can't identify the bush thing. I don't know what it is. But you know, I assume it's a very good old past, but I'm not sure. It's a tree that's got me perplexed.
But it also, in the comprehensive plan, it also talks about, it says plan for use of town forest, including development of trail system within the forest. But it's just a number of things that they list as the responsibility of the Conservation Commission. So developing a plan for a trail system has recall ever being discussed.
In the development of the comprehensive plan, you mean?
In the comprehensive plan states that that's one of the intended
Right.
uses of a town forest,
Right,
is developing a trail system within the forest.
right.
Well, I guess, again, we can really, this is something that's gonna continue on and on, I don't wanna go too far with it, but
Right.
for example, just to use that example, to say that the network of trails that are used in a logging scenario then become access points and trail systems that can be more easily maintained and don't have to be created from scratch after a harvest is something that is a complementary use. Toward that end, you can also look at it and say that we have had discussions within the Hebo property and within this property of what do we do if we don't actually have access to get to the frontage of the property? So we also have to look at this, you talk about, grander scale sorts of scenarios as well. So do we put forth heavy amounts of time to create a trail network out through there that's involved with ADA like Goat Hill and this and that and the other if you can't even get to the property by vehicle? I mean, I'm just saying, we're talking about, again, complementary versus conflicting goal statements, and we do have to look at all these things specifically and, in the 30,000 foot view as well. So again, the first thing that just jumps to mind is there something that is conflicting?
This must have been a little different, funner for you in the sense that you probably haven't done a lot of projects that had either a town's perspective, because it's publicly owned, or, I'm making a big assumption, maybe you've worked for some land trust, I don't know.
Yeah, I work with quite a few land trusts, but yeah.
Okay, so there is, I see in your overarching statements, there's protection for historical resources on this. And, as well as the possibility of a trail sites. I mean, I thought about that Esker being a good place for trail. Even though the Esker's, a lot of it's farm removed, it'd still be a good trail site. You know, some good vistas of that wetland down through there. I still would like to not proceed fast, because I do think there's a lot more that can be developed in terms of the history of the town farm. My wife's got a second cousin, to mother's cousin, that did a history of town farm in Deerfield, and she wrote quite a little bit on it. And it's amazing how much a town farm can play into a town's history. So that it would be nice to flush that out. Flush out the Hubbards, flush out the use of that land.
Well, again, it's my contention that none of those things are
Conflicting.
precluded or conflicting with
No,
what I put out there, so.
I don't see a problem. I don't see a problem with that.
And you're protecting environmental historical values.
Well, and again, just personally speaking, if there's anything that shows up in any manner that wasn't even put forth in a 3-word statement among one sentence on a 20-page plan, it's an evolutionary document. Bring it up and we can talk about it. Not a big thing.
What I found is you have the plan, and then you get out there on site, and your decisions are made right there at that point.
Correct. Yep.
So if we get out there and we see the cemetery, we're gonna ribbon that off, and, nobody will go near it with a piece of equipment. And then how do we improve that afterwards? And that all can be decided 5 years down the road.
Right.
And I think the main thing is to get this
We need to get this
rolling,
right.
and then,
Yeah, again, if we don't have a consensus within the committee after the adoption and implementation of the plan, it would come back to this committee and even not necessarily the town meeting after that, but if we do get to the point where everyone on the committee is comfortable at enacting or implementing in the verbiage of actually hiring work done out there, then obviously we've got more authorization that's happening at a later date with us back up through the chain again. Again, not necessarily to the town. We can't keep going to the town meeting in order to worry about a tree or, one of these or one of those or, you know, whatever. You can't keep going back to town meeting when one small thing changes. But you do have to have this thing adopted to the point where you can actually keep, again, the train on the tracks and moving forward. So toward that end, I guess, is the idea, like Mike had talked about with the, you know, the added verbiage, not just the adaptation and the adapting and the implementing, mentioned about with farther authorization, or excuse me, with farther comprehensive plan, whatever that phrase was that you used. So again, I want to put this back to us here within the next couple of weeks so that I can get what is this base statement back to Jen for a drafting of a warrant article. So I guess whatever that concept was about the, again, if the phrase is adapt, implement,
Adopt.
adopt.
I have a question about that. Why are we saying adopting and implementing? Why don't we just say adopting?
Because you can adopt it and not do anything.
Well, you're adopting the plan, so we're gonna follow this plan. If you say, see, I'm coming from a perspective, I was on a planning board in a fairly big city, I'm a civil engineer, and if you're implementing a plan, you are implementing this specific plan. And if you want to make any changes, if you're not going to implement exactly, you have to make a new plan.
Right.
If we can just adopt it and we implement it according to this, I mean, why do we have to say both words? I mean, it
doesn't really matter to me.
The
because I
legal
would, you
terms,
know,
that's a question, you should have, you know, all right, we're adopting this plan.
No,
We might not necessarily implement.
Well, the question is if, toward that point, if you say we've adopted the plan, and then we go back and all of us through 6 months worth of workshopping have decided at the end of next summer, we've taken 3 tours out there and everybody's of a consensus that, okay, we're gonna do this on this acre. Now are the townspeople going to require and think that that phrase adopt did not imply implement? To where there's another authorization required?
But the plan is to do the work. I don't know, that's a question.
No, that's just,
that
I'm
you need to
not
have.
giving an answer, I'm just saying if you're comfortable with that word meaning that it can be enacted, then whatever, that's just verbiage to me.
I think it's already been adopted. They paid him for it.
That's not being adopted by the town.
No, it's not.
No, but you, no, it isn't.
The other thing that I would want people in the community to feel comfortable with, if you're gonna say, if there's gonna be a warrant article that says we're gonna adopt and implement this plan, that's fine. But adopting and implementing a plan that's subject to change, I don't know if people would be comfortable with that.
I don't think that's something, you're chasing something that you never actually reach though, Andy, I think. If you would have to change and adopt for every one thing that you see out there on the face of the earth, and then come back and amend the plan, and then come back and get reauthorization, you're never actually ever going to get there.
Right.
Sooner or later, you kind of have to say, all right, new information will show, and it will be worked with and complemented, but we need to move forward with it under some concept of authorization. So I guess the authorization to me is what I'm asking. I don't think we ever would get to that point that you're talking about, where everyone gives a hallelujah and we all go out there and put a dot on a tree or something like that.
Hang on.
I mean, to me, it's just tough to say we're gonna adopt and implement a plan, but that plan, once it's adopted and passed on the town floor, that it's subject to change.
It's a working document.
Because that could mean that the inventory itself may not change, but.
Yeah, but toward that end, an inventory changes every year.
Right, but we could.
Yeah, what about a butters, you know, I'm just thinking about small subdivision plans that are.
Authorize the plan.
I just want to have a consensus tonight of what I bring back to Jen to try to draft, that's all. We're looking for another verb.
Yeah, you can see my head, wheels turning. Like adopting I've been so out of.
Anything for the peanut gallery out there, throw
Yeah.
throw it down, let's go, man.
Like adopting the plan, but implementing it
How about-
to meet the comprehensive plan, or something, yeah, I'm trying to think
Guidelines
of
as
the.
set forth in
in
the
the
forest management plan and the comprehensive plan. With, somehow the wording has to be that the comprehensive plan is the umbrella.
Right,
And then the forest management plan is enacted or is implemented as.
to meet the requirements of the
Or the recommendations.
recommendations of the comprehensive plan,
Right.
yeah.
Did you write that down?
It's on video,
I was
it's like.
asking you to repeat that. Yes, play that back.
When that's aired, we all listen. Write it all down.
I understood it in concept, but if you make me repeat it again, it's not gonna happen.
What's that?
I said, I understood it in principle, but if you make me repeat it, I'm not gonna come
Did it
back.
sound like,
Yeah,
at least we have a direction, and we can wordsmith this, but if we can agree on the intent of it.
The concept is to have the comprehensive plan, in your words, as the umbrella,
Right.
as implemented by the plan.
To implement the forest management plan, or the land management plan, if you want to change the name of it to get, make it a little bit broader.
Consensus, yeah.
A little broader. But you do have sections in there about, everything else.
Not timber stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, based on the comprehensive plan, you can put in trails through the whole foundation system, and along the esker and near the cemetery, and looking at surrounding land types and
kind of like adopt the forest management plan. Now I lost it. With the goal of furthering the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Something to that effect.
I'm hearing Jen in my head, and she's saying something like, don't get too crafty about it, don't get too, we can go into
Then you can just
the-
say, adopt the forest management plan.
Well, all I'm trying to say is.
That's what-
I got something. Adopt the forest management plan while always meeting the recommendations of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, that's basically what
Yeah,
just
yes.
said, yeah.
I didn't like refer to the right.
Okay, well, yeah.
Sorry. Well, I'll
Adopt the plan in order to further goals of the comprehensive plan? Again,
Well, to meet the
again,
goals of
to
the
meet the
comprehensive plan.
recommendations, goals and recommendations.
Yeah. It's short and sweet, but it's just, I didn't want just implement this plan. I wanted, that this is the be-all, end-all. It has to include, like you said,
No,
the overarching.
what I was getting at by that comment about Jen in my head is that is a job description that this committee has. That's our job, is to implement this plan with that comprehensive plan in mind. So all I'm trying to say is that it may be somewhat redundant that goes into the warrant article. Maybe. To put it in the warrant article may be great, and then everyone would maybe farther understand that if they don't know the job description of the Conservation Commission as,
Yeah, but they're just saying, if you don't mention that, they're just saying forest management. They're not thinking of everything else. That will bring everything else in, like the historic and the wildlife and.
no, again, I'm not disagreeing with what may make it a more adoptable article. That phrase may add consensus to it.
Right.
But that is something which is our job description and therefore is somewhat redundant, is all I'm saying. So, does it help to get people to understand what our job is? Yes. Is it redundant within the warrant article? Yes.
Well,
So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't put it in. I just can hear someone say, that's extra added material that's gonna confuse things, you know, that's up to us to decide, I suppose.
Why can't you say,
I don't mind that, I don't mind the wording, I'm just,
whereas the Forest Conservation Committee is charged with whatever we're supposed to do, and then you come up with the language, the legal language. You have a whereas, a couple of whereases in there to explain what we do, why we did make this decision, and then this is what we want to do. Adopt the management plan to meet the goals and recommendations of the comprehensive plan on the town forest law.
well, I thought it was pretty, that's pretty short and to the point.
Yeah. And if Jen thinks that, you know, we need to.
Yeah, again, we
what
can-
do, we
right,
can put a whereas in there.
Yeah.
yeah, again, I'm not the wordsmith from the legal side of it, for sure, but,
I've seen enough whereases to.
for sure. Okay, well, that's really all I have for tonight, but we can, again, this is something that's not meant to be concluded tonight, it will
Do
continue.
you want to put out a sentence to all of us and?
Yeah,
And we'll
that's
sign
fine.
off on it before you give it to Jen?
Sure.
By the 7th of February?
Yeah.
How's that?
Again, that date was something that she didn't proclaim as being a hard date for us, but obviously I want to use that as a goal.
Because then we have to schedule public hearings, is that?
Again, though, remember, the public hearings would come before the quote-unquote implementation part, as in in the field.
So we don't have to before the annual meeting?
I don't think we do.
Okay, that was a question I just had. I didn't-
Before any actual activity
So
would
before the
happen, you
activity,
should be, yes,
okay.
but it doesn't necessarily
That makes
have
more
to happen
sense.
before a warrant article.
No, that makes more sense. But you do need to have, yeah, do you have to post something ahead of time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Again, I don't think that, just this is speaking from experience, if we have another, you know, you're out there on site, you can talk this stuff through in theory until you're blue in the face. And I can take you in 5 minutes and show you in the woods an illustration of a cutting description or a neighboring woodlot that's treated in a similar way, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and it all makes sense. So toward that end, trying to say that we're going to have everything up and out there and ready to be adopted by the 1st of June to go to work, it does not have to happen. But we need to have the adoption of the plan, work can happen, and these workshops can happen through the course of the summer. And again, but you just want to have the procedure of how to go about the authorization, how to go about the implementation, and to know, again, I don't want to have to go back to a town meeting again should we decide that we are where we can start doing work out there.
I worked on the Osborne town lots, and they were probably about 750 acres, there's 2 of them. And there was a forestry committee, and mostly it was the selectmen. And it was managed in conjunction with the Department of Conservation. So we had to develop a plan that met their requirements, their comprehensive plan for public lands. It was public lands. And, you know, all those concerns of wildlife and historical sites had to be listed, but then the implementation, when you get out in the field, you see that stream and, you know, even though it doesn't say you gotta keep back 50 feet, except for that area because there's a big wetland there and you wanna protect that. You know, those things were made on site at the time.
Oh, yeah, and the seasons change things.
Right, and so we didn't have to go back to the town every
Right.
single time to,
Mhm.
when we wanted to start cutting again or cut a certain area and that kind of thing.
So there's probably enough evidence on the town farm to talk about the reverse process of what shouldn't have been done. You know,
Oh, yeah.
in terms of, you know, taking the water, road water, you know, taking the SQL completely, you know, maybe if you really looked at it hard, you probably could see disease vectors in the trees. As a total aside, just for, I read a book last night I couldn't put down. It was a real short read about some little old lady and a 14, 15-year-old boy in high times, and they owned 1,000 acres upstate Maine. And it was about an old Scotchman surveyor, and the techniques he used to define the line tree that had overgrown the stamp on it. Somebody marked it prior to the revolution, right after the revolution, actually it was 1819.
Wow.
And it was a real, I couldn't put it down. It was just about a surveyor's job. And he was an old sea captain that picked up navigation and turned the navigation skills into cutting. And it was really, and it was about the lot next to it was totally clear cut by, it might have been J.P. Stevens. I mean, it was that kind of a thing. We didn't want this 1,000 acres that hadn't been cut yet. And the guy next to it that was doing the cutting he wanted his fingers on that piece. And it was just a really good read. It talked about furlongs and chains and something I never quite understood was holding the chain up in order to get that up and down valley stuff out of there. You know, I've always wondered how surveyors actually walk the distance.
Towards the slope, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just a good read, and it was very informative. And I can think about somebody walking that town farm lot, where it was originally surveyed as a part of a 300-acre lot in 1774, and it was done by Joseph Warren, who lived down Oldfields Road, Emery's Bridge Road, and so we know a lot about that, and it's just, you know, I think we've got the opportunity here, if we keep this loose, to turn this into what the comprehensive plan wants us to do, which is to make conservation and education process. And like I did find my 2 books that were given by a group that works on just town forests, you know, and
We can call up on
but no, it's, hey.
Should we adjourn so she can go home?
I think so.
Oh, no, don't.
So, again, my job then, make a quick draft of the statement that may develop into a warrant article, put it to you guys, add and amend, kick that back to Jen in order to shoot for something somewhere.
I know this is called a forest water management plan, but in terms of this particular lot, it looks like we're doing more than just forestry.
Right.
And you know, and that's, you know, that's part of what's throwing us.
I have another quick question. The town has no policy for selling wood products?
Oh, that was on my list too.
I mean, I'm
We
sorry-
asked that last time, and you were gonna ask about
Sorry to
it.
backtrack, but
That was another thing that.
Town
I thought
policy
we
on
were
timber
gonna have
sales.
On the warrant is to authorize the town to sell
Selling timber.
timber.
Yeah, that was a
What are you-
question we
what are you
had
reading
last
this
night.
from?
From last.
the minutes from the last meeting.
Yeah, I had that too.
Gee, you should have looked at those, you could have taken that out before you turned it over. No, but that was one of the questions that when Steve was.
No, the policy, what that's referring to was when Jen put the last warrant article to the lawyer, the policy was that did the last warrant article authorize the sale of the timber? No.
No, but I have down from my own personal notes, town needs policy for selling timber wood from logging.
Yeah, but that's what I'm just saying that the word policy is just the word that the lawyer used to try to interpret that there was no actual verbiage within the warrant article that hired the plan to authorize the work to sell the timber yet. The word policy is what's throwing you, and it's not
Well, that's
that.
the word, I just wrote down what was said.
Oh, I know, but that's, I'm just saying that's the word that the lawyer used, but you're tripping over that word.
Article 32, 1958, to see if the town will sell the timber and the pulp on the old town farm under the state forest management plan. Well, that's pretty,
There you
that's
go.
pretty solid language.
So it's been
Yeah,
done before,
so it's been
yeah.
done before. I just like to know if Jen has anything on that.
Right, well, that would have, well, again, the only catch behind that would have been,
And I'd like to-
you're talking a cut before, you're talking 2 cuts ago.
Oh, I know I have.
So yeah, for curiosity's sake, I would love to know.
You'd love to see that
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
And so would I. But, it should, you know.
Because that would have been your blister rust map and whatnot like that.
I think that-
Yeah, thank you.
Is this last page, Steve, on the plan, the inventory, is this number down here, the 122,960, is that the projected revenue from the,
Nope, the inventory is the entire timber worth of the lot at the time of inventory, current market prices, 6 inches and up. Total land inventory,
Oh, timber.
timber inventory, yeah, well, I just meant,
No, because sometimes you add the land value.
oh, no, I just meant that it's not a harvest, it's not a revenue estimate. It is if one were to develop an idea and say, well, what's all this timber out there worth? A tax basis. If you were a private landowner, you do an inventory and you say, in the year of yada yada, the timber was worth X. X amount of board feet, X amount of tons of pulp, X amount of dollars. That's what that page is.
That would set the basis for,
so right now, if this plan were implemented today, if we were to cut this today, based on this inventory, is that what we would get?
No, because the recommendation is not to cut all of that. That is the total, all trees on the property.
it's illegal.
But I guess what I'm trying to understand is what are we going to get for revenue based upon the plan?
You haven't adopted the plan yet.
I know, but why would I adopt a plan if I didn't know what I was getting for revenue? Is what I'm,
It's a circular argument. The recommendations within the plan don't say, if you told me, we don't want to do any cutting out there unless we're going to make $20,000, $40,000, $60,000, then that would have been part of a goal statement, which then made its way into a stand harvest recommendation. But let's face it, you would have bit my head off if I ever did that. That wouldn't have ever happened.
So to
So it's
develop that
just-
number, you have to go to each stand that's in there.
right,
Look at the inventory,
right,
determine what percent you're gonna cut of that inventory, and then determine the value of those products, and do that stand by stand by stand, and then add that all up. However, the problem that we're gonna have is, we may like chunk out 5 acres up near the cemetery. We may chunk out 20 acres near the foundation. So that all has to be put in there, and
You have to start with the whole before you can start to talk about what you elect to do here, there, and everywhere.
so this is a total inventory of all the acres.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
So if a lot was long and narrow and was thinking,
Okay.
you can get, climb uphill to get to.
So if the Conservation Committee came back and said,
Would charge you.
we found A, B, C, and D in stand 2 and we don't want to do any work in stand 2 at all, or we found this critter that doesn't like to have more sunlight than A, B, C, or D, so we want to restrict the harvesting to a little lighter cut than what was recommended in the plan. All of those things are going to amend that number that your revenue might be, but we haven't even gotten that far yet. That's where the working part of the document comes in. This is what we know at the date of the inventory, this is what we had for goals at the field work time. And if anything comes up that amends the suggested technique, management technique, then your revenues will change. That can't really be, I don't want to say it can't really be known yet, but I'm presuming that there's going to be changes brought to the plan before anything we get that far.
So in some of the descriptions on these stands, like what does the number of merchantable trees per acre mean?
6 inches and
6 inches and up. Yep.
And that is what goes into the final number that it develops that.
The inventory
Overall
number,
inventory.
yep. All of that data, stand by stand, is exactly what the computer printout showed on the statistical analysis, stand by stand of what is growing out there right now. 6 inches and up.
So, do we need to ask the town to have something at town meeting to allow timber to be sold?
No.
So that doesn't have to happen? The town can sell timber?
That would be the implementation part that we're talking about. Again, if we wanted to say specifically, I mean, to get back to the adopt the plan versus adopt and implement the plan versus hire to cut, I mean, make the verb whatever you want it to be. But no, if the author is, what I'm shooting for is to make sure that we don't have to go back
Well, that's why
specifically and ask for
I'm
these
asking
things.
you
Yeah,
for the minutes then.
right.
So what you're saying is,
That's why I'm saying the word itself that we use, to me, is a means to an end. As long as everyone understands and is comfortable with what we're implying by that warrant article, that they can get behind it, then we're good. Whatever it happens to be.
Like I said, 6 years later, the article said to select cut the town farm for pulp and paper. So, you know, something changed, something might have changed in those 6 years as how
Yep.
they acted on that law.
Well, again, if we had, if the warrant article read just like that one did, then the
Gotcha.
implied problem is that we're not managing on all the other stuff. So we're trying to back off and say, here we have this forest management plan that is recommending management and stewardship of all of these natural
That
resources.
was my point about the title of the thing, as opposed to, you know, the fact that it's a land use plan as well as a forest.
Yep.
use. In the broad sense.
Yep. Okay, I have my job.
move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I say,
All in favor?
Definitely.